Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the District of Illinois Fireside Chat. We are so happy to have everyone here. We want to begin by wishing everyone a belated New Year's. Hope all of your New Year's has gotten off to a good start. And also a happy MLK Day, a day we pause to reflect on the life, legacy, and impact of our brother, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. What we're going to do this evening is we're going to have a discussion about Martin Luther King in an age of moral crisis. And we're going to discuss all of the different things that relate to what we feel, what some people feel is a moral crisis occurring in America. Before we get started, I do want to do a little bit of brief housekeeping. Uh, this is our first fireside chat of the year. We have a number of fireside chats that we are planning that will be happening over the course of the year. So please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you're watching us on YouTube or on Facebook or elsewhere, so you can keep up. But we will be discussing issues about the relevancy of Black Greek letter organizations. We will have another conversation about the denouncement fad that is overtaking some of our organizations. And we'll be doing different profiles of significant individuals, not just members of Alpha Phi Alpha, but significant individuals who have made an impact on our communities. Now, with that being said, I want to bring on our panel today. And we have a great panel that is going to be joining with us. So first, ask Brother Dr. Leonard McInnes to come forth. Dr. McInnes, how are you, sir?
I'm well, Brother Smoot. How are you this evening?
I am doing good. And for those who are unaware, Brother Dr. McInnes is the district director for the District of Illinois of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And today he will be a panelist in our discussion.
That's right.
And next we want to bring on our former general president, Brother Everett B. Ward. Brother Ward, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Brother Smoth, and to Brother McKenzie as well. It's good to be with you both this evening.
It's absolutely wonderful to have you, Brother President. We are grateful that you took out some time out of your very, very busy schedule to be with us today. So truly know that we appreciate you. And also we have Brother Dr. Frederick Ingram, who is joining us. Brother Ingram, welcome.
Yeah, Brother Ingram is having some technology issues,
okay,
and he's coming on momentarily.
Absolutely. Well, we'll just bring him in once he gets that organized. So I want to begin. Actually, let me begin with a couple of introductions. Brother Ward, would you mind telling our audience just a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your background? So we make sure everyone is familiar with you.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, I'm honored to be with you tonight. My background is I am a son of North Carolina and live in my hometown of Raleigh, North Carolina, which is the capital city of the state. And very fortunate that I am the fifth generation of our family members to live in this city in my hometown. A proud graduate of two historically Black colleges, St. Augustine's University and North Carolina A&T, and a master's degree from North Carolina State University. I am very active in my community in a number of areas, but my greatest admiration of service comes through the greatest fraternity in the world, and that is Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity. Have served as chapter president, and my chapter here, Phi Lambda chapter, will be commemorating its 100th centennial anniversary in December. Founded December 1926. Served as Southern Regional Vice President in this great fraternity. And then the Brotherhood gave me the privilege to serve as General President. And so our years of service, I am semi-retired, as I tell people, but I continue to enjoy my work. I am a currently a senior fellow at the Center for the Study of Historically Black Colleges and Universities at Virginia Union, as well as doing lecture work at North Carolina State University, and continue to be very involved in the community. And you are always an alpha that works. So I enjoy my work in the fraternity now more than ever before.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Brother Ward. Brother McKinnis, if you would give us a brief introduction of yourself.
Yeah, first of all, Brother Smoot, it's always great to be in the presence of brothers. And, it's truly an honor to be here, both with my brother, Dr. Ingram, and of course, a passionate president, Brother Dr. Everett B. Ward. Looking forward to engaging these brothers this evening. So I'll be very brief. I'm an associate professor of Black Studies and Religion at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I specialize in Black religions, and King is one of the subjects I look at, and so looking forward to sort of bearing upon that as I engage this conversation this evening. I'm currently working on, as you know, Brother Smoot, a book on the Nation of Islam, really exploring my roots as a Chicagoan, right? And the religious diversity that unfolded in that space. I currently serve as the Illinois District Director, and this is my fourth year, and the final year in that role. Like Brother Ward, my chapter, I was made at Mu chapter. We are not celebrating 100 years, but we are coming up this year, Brother Ward, to our 50th year. So we're looking forward to that golden anniversary of the Mu chapter. I'm a proud captain and son of Mu chapter here in the District of Illinois. I had to say that, Brother Ward. Brother Smoot makes fun of us captains, but I will yield.
All right. Thank you, Brother McKinnis. And we are looking forward to these celebrations for both Mu chapter and also Mu Lambda chapter,
That's
which
right.
is also celebrating their 50th anniversary this year. So we are definitely looking forward to that. Brother Ingram, we want to thank you for joining us this evening. I'm glad we got you on. Can you give us a brief little introduction of yourself so you can our viewers can know a little bit about you?
For sure. Glad to be here. Glad to see you, Brother Dr. Ward, for the invitation, and Brother Dr. McKinnis as well. Dr. Frederick Ingram Jr., I'm Assistant Professor of Higher Education in here.
I think we're having some audio issues with them.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think we can hear you now.
Okay. Previously was assistant professor at Michigan State University, as well as the University of Texas, at where I was also assistant professor of African American Studies and Criminology. While in that, I'm also author of Black Liberation Through Action and Resistance Move. Came out in the fall of 2023. Made at the Alpha Omicron chapter, seated at Johnson C. Smith University. Glad to be a part of the Centennial Club. Thank you all for inviting me.
It's nice to have everyone start joining the Centennial Clubs, after us, me being a proud Initiative Theta chapter and a member of Xi Lambda chapter, which both have celebrated their centennial. So, just got to rub that in a little bit.
Yeah.
I want to get right into our discussion. I had one way I was planning to begin this discussion today, but then I ran across a copy of the letter that Donald Trump sent to the president of Norway, and it just, when I read that, it just stuck at me. And given the context of what we're talking about today, of Dr. King in the age of a moral crisis, this struck me because this is, about his claiming that he deserved the Nobel Prize, even though the woman from Argentina gave it to him. We look at today, we celebrate Dr. King, who was a Nobel Prize winner, and probably one of the great distinguished Nobel Prize winners from this country. But I was particularly struck when I saw in the letter, and I quote, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace, although it will always be predominant, but can now think about what is good and proper for the United States of America. And the reason that struck me is, in preparing for this today, we are talking about what the legacy of our dear brother Dr. King, and the what we perceive to be a potential moral crisis. So I want to begin with Jess and Dr. McInnes. Actually, I want to throw this to you first. I'm assuming that you saw that letter as well today. And can you tell me what your thoughts were regarding that, particularly coming on a day like today where we pause to celebrate and remember the life and legacy of Dr. King?
Yeah, let me actually sort of take a step back and just say one piece of disclaimer information. That the thoughts and views expressed here are not the thoughts of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. They belong to the brothers who are represented here on this call. Just a disclaimer as we get into this conversation.
I was going to get to that, but
I think it's worth saying a couple of things. By the time Martin King died or was assassinated in Memphis of April of 1968, King was the most hated Negro in America. Let's be very clear about that. The FBI had taps on Martin King that went on for miles, right? He was viewed as a threat to this democracy. He was viewed as a threat to American imperialism across the world. And he had become critical in one of his most public statements criticizing his government, of course, was his Riverside speech in New York, in which he called the nation to task for its involvement in the Vietnam War. King saw a real discrepancy between what was unfolding in Vietnam and the conditions of Black life that persisted in the States, particularly among soldiers who were fighting together and returned home to very different situations. King saw that as a travesty in this nation. Now, square this idea of King being the most hated Negro in America, who was critical of his government, right? In other words, while King had some sense that the American ideal of democracy was workable, he was also concerned that that democratic project would not unfold without good tension, right? So King never avoided tension. He put pressure on the system. Now you have to square that with what we see unfolding in Washington, D.C. in this moment, and the person who has attached himself to this idea of King, right? Whether it's he or his staff, right? The first time that Trump ran, he was convinced that MLK would support his ideas and, would support his notion of the presidency. So Trump himself is an individual, and let's just name, I'm not going to say 45 or 47, the American president who sits in Washington, D.C. really is threatened, right? He is threatened by the idea of a free Black man. That is number one. We should be very clear about that. He is threatened by the idea of a free Black man. But there is also this idea in Trump's imagination that he has to always, work to demonstrate that he is as good as the others. So there are these memes going around where, people are giving Trump a trophy for eating Snickers the fastest, or a trophy, for hula hoop dancing, because a person of small ego needs to have their ego massaged in order to feel big and to feel proud. But we know, as we uncover the history, that King received the Nobel Peace Prize because King himself was a legitimate architect of peace in the world. There's a very disparate gap between what King worked for and what we see unfolding in the political pragmatism of someone like Donald Trump. I see no real connection between these two men.
Brother Ward, what are your thoughts regarding that, particularly not only in line with what Brother Dr. McInnes just said, but in line with this whole thing almost besmirching the notion of the Nobel Prize, and how Dr. King was so deserving of it, and his words, sour grapes for not getting it, how do you see that situation?
Well, I think the letter underscores the sharp contrast between Dr. King and the current president of these United States. When Dr. King accepted the Nobel Peace Prize, he accepted it, and his words were, "I accept it for the people of the movement." He did not accept it for himself. Accepted it for the people who were courageous and on the front line fighting for justice and freedom and equality. He also, the monetary gift that came with the Nobel Peace Prize was one that he shared with movement and the cause for continued freedom. It was not something that he kept for himself. So I don't see any comparison at all between these two very distinct individuals. Dr. King's legacy that we celebrate is a legacy of great intellect, a great strategist who understood and was committed to the complete ideal of man's relationship to man, that humanity must be the foundation. And if you read King extensively, like I know all of you have, he not only talked about injustice in America, he also was focused on injustice around the world.
Right.
And his discussion about brotherhood always focused on a global view of brotherhood and discussed that we must have relationship with our brothers and sisters around the world who find themselves in a system of oppression. And I think that's the distinction between, well, I don't think there's even any comparison. I mean, you're talking about a true scholar, a man who had earned degrees and who was committed through his actions and words of service, because, you know, he said everyone can be great because everyone can serve.
Right.
The current occupant of this White House has given regular indication that service and mankind and the commitment to all humanity is not in his priority at all. His priority is self-grandizement and personal wealth and the wealth development for others that are in his very limited circle of individuals.
Absolutely. You know, I think, and I want to direct this next question to brother Dr. Ingram. Dr. King, sometime towards the end of his life, he started talking about what he called the triple sickness that was existing in particularly the U.S. And that triple sickness being racism, excessive materialism, and militarism. And Dr. Ingram, in the context of someone who has studied and written about liberation theology, as someone who looked at that, one of my very favorite books in the absolute world is A Black Theology of Liberation by our own brother, Dr. James Cone. But within the context of where we sit now of racism, excessive materialism, and militarism, how do you see that those labels still applying to where we sit now, as Dr. King described them in the late 60s, or have we made any movement or any progress since that time, from both your perspective and maybe also from a liberation theology perspective?
Sure. I think the racism, the capitalism, the militarism, obviously, how the current president strong-armed the Nobel Prize from the actual. I think that is very present. But I like to add a fourth prong to this, and that fourth prong being religiosity, right? This idea of what religion is through the lens of creates this idea. Can you hear me?
Yeah. You're cutting in and out a little bit, but
This idea of religiosity also creates this idea that religion themselves through a Christian view is to look a particular kind of way, right? And so that particular approach through the lens of whiteness and white supremacy guides all these other things, militarism, right, capitalism, and racism, and more specifically, more pointedly, anti. All of these things are directly that was talking about and was getting to the later part of life was an ideology and an ideal of America and the ills that America never actually dealt with.
right.
Is where capitalism comes from, right? Militarism and all of those things are all extensions of that, right? And then racism and anti-blackness were deeply within that space, right? The way that America operates today. That I spoke about where we are now. We have not moved far at advancement, but we have not moved far.
Right. And
Go ahead.
and yeah, I mean, and you're still breaking up a little bit, but you know that notion that we have not moved far enough, I think is very salient because we have to look at what has our progress been from, you know, looking at the way the what was granted to us during the Civil Rights Bill that was signed in 1965, or what transpired immediately after King's death, and we look at where we are now. And I also found another thing. Another thing Dr. King said was, and I think this applies today when we talk about the moral climate of our country. Dr. King also said the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who, in time of moral crisis, preserve their neutrality. And I actually want to throw this to Brother Ward, because I know, Brother Ward, that you have been out in the community and working with people. And, you know, during your time as general president, you had the opportunity to work with a number of different community-based organizations. And so when we take that statement about those who are silent during this time of moral crisis, like how do you, or how did you find that in your interactions with these organizations, and the ones that have been silent, is there a rhyme or reason as to why some of these organizations choose to be silent instead of speaking out regarding the moral problems that we have?
Well, first, let me, when I became general president in January of 2017, the current occupant of the White House was also installed weeks later as president of the United States.
Right.
If you all will remember. And we selected as our anchor focus as general president, and for our administration, we used the words of Dr. King. And remember what Dr. King said: we are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is no such thing as being too late. This is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action. So our administration was very intentional that we have to lead, particularly as the fraternity of King. We have to be in the forefront of standing against injustice wherever it raises its head. And so we felt compelled, and continue to feel, that we must be the example, that we have to work with organizations that are willing to stand up and fight. And so we worked with our other Divine Nine organizations. As president of the Council of Presidents, we were very aggressive in having a unifying agenda, a social justice agenda. And if you remember, we focused on voter engagement, voter education, public policy issues. We focused on the census because we knew that the census had a direct link to redistricting and how political power would be distributed across this country. So I believe that it's very important for us to continue to be on the front line unapologetically. And we are the scholars, we are the leaders, the very foundation of this fraternity. And as our historian, you understand that when you know the history of Alpha, Charles Hamilton Houston was not quiet.
Absolutely.
Thurgood Marshall, the student of Charles Hamilton Houston, was not quiet.
Right.
None of our jewels were men who were complacent and silent. We have to continue to embrace that foundation of Alpha that says we're in the forefront. And as Brother McKenzie said earlier, Dr. King was not always a celebrated hero like he is now. You know, remember, he was condemned and was told that he was moving too fast. You remember when he went to Montgomery, they were saying, wait a minute, this young preacher, what are you doing? Everything, we need to keep everything on an even playing field. We all are getting along. And Dr. King said, no, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice, injustice everywhere. So the King that we celebrate today, we have to tell the whole story. And one of the things I always remind people, this new marketing of the March for Jobs and Freedom, and everyone tries to focus on, I have a dream. But there's components in that speech that we must never forget. Right. Dr. King said, you remember what he said? We can never be satisfied as long as a Negro is the victim of unspeakable horrors of police brutality. And he goes on to talk about we can never be satisfied. But he also talks about we have also come to this hallowed space to remind America of the urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism.
Yes.
See, everybody wants us to focus on the dream.
Right, right.
But as scholars, we want to study Dr. King in his totality and the whole body work of Dr. King, and not this manufactured, make you feel good, when my children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. But what he was saying throughout the address is that America, we have come to cash a check that we have received for insufficient funds. And that was a very strong, aggressive, and very direct. And if you'll remember, the history tells us that the president, John F. Kennedy, was so moved by that address. And you remember the legion of leaders, civil rights leaders, including our brothers, went to meet with President Kennedy immediately following the March on Washington to focus on legislation. And see, those are the parts of the King body of work that we have to educate the community on. Don't get caught up in the flash and what American society wants you to focus on. Focus on the strategy.
Well, and I think your point actually, ties back, and I'm going to throw this to Brother McKinnis. When we talk about those organizations, those aspects of our community that are uncomfortably silent right now, who are not speaking out, who are not taking action, and sometimes these are some of the same groups who are criticizing us for either not doing enough or doing too much. And so I guess I want to ask from an academic perspective, and Brother Ingram, you can also chime in on this as well, but is from your experience as university professors, is there silence that you're hearing within your context as professors, not only interacting with other professors and faculty, but other groups on your collective campuses that are strangely and unusually silent regarding what we during this time of what we perceive as a moral crisis. I think start with Brother Ennis and go to Brother Ingram.
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear. I'm gonna try and bridge a gap with Brother Ward here momentarily. When fascism and totalitarianism hits the streets, academics will go silent, right? In other words, when academics are under attack, when the university, when their right to critique, right? In other words, we know we live in this context in which even tenured professors' voices are unusually quiet in this particular moment because there are ways in which white supremacy can be embedded with the state and with educational institutions, thereby silencing, right, or crippling the academic's voice. But I do want to say one thing real quick, Brother Smoot, about Brother Ward's comments. It is critical, in fact, it is beyond critical, that we heed the essence and the warning that Brother Ward led us to in this particular moment, right? And that is, King was very critical of time, right? In other words, King was very critical of time. One of his famous speeches, and Brother Ward, you're right. We have this tendency to read the King that's celebrated in January or celebrated on YouTube or, in the, make me feel good, kumbaya, guitar playing, fire, smoke in the background King that really has become this figurine of the American imagination. But the reality is that the King that was killed in Memphis was not America's favorite son. We have to be honest about that. The King that was assassinated was not America's favorite son. He was a victim of COINTELPRO. Right? He was a victim of wiretaps everywhere he went. Why do you wiretap someone that you deem to be safe and who you deem to be a good Negro? He was not that.
Well, I mean, we remember Hoover went on record as saying that King was the most dangerous man in America.
I just told my children tonight, the most dangerous Negro in America by the time he was killed. Right. But real quick on this idea of time and why that's important for Black Greek letter organizations in this particular moment. Silence is not an action. Is not an option for us. That's right. It is not an option for Black Greek letter organizations to even give the semblance of silence. When King went to Birmingham, Brother Ward, you know the story. The injunction was put in place to stop King from protesting.
Right.
The legislature met under the directives of Governor Eugene Bill O'Connor to put a law in place that would prevent King from protesting. King was determined, in spite of that law, to still go out and protest. So King gets arrested. While he's in prison, or in jail rather, King makes this audacious claim, right? King tells us that in this world, there are all types of laws. There are just laws and there are unjust laws. Right. There's a divine law and there's a human law. But King also understood that sometimes human laws do not square with the divine law.
Right.
Then King argued that if you have a human law that denigrates the human person, that denigrates human personality, King argued we have a moral obligation to disobey those laws. King understood his act of disobedience as a spiritual journey. It was a part of his theological corpus that really gave him the strength, the voice to do what he did, which, by the way, was in line with a Black Baptist radical tradition of Denmark Vesey and Nat Turner. Those are the theological streets that King is drawing from. Right. So in this particular moment, Brother Ward, you're right. And I remember very well your campaign, the fierce urgency of now. And I will stop these comments real quick, reminding us of what Baldwin, the quote from Baldwin when he was interviewed by a journalist. Baldwin says, "You had my mama's time, you had my daddy's time, You had my auntie and my uncle's time. Now, how much of my time do you want for your progress? Right? In other words, like Baldwin, King was convinced that time itself does not bring progress. There has to be this intentionality of putting pressure against the system. And finally, as Senator Mark from Arizona indicated, and why he's being attacked right now from the GOP. If there are unjust laws and unjust orders, right, we have a moral responsibility to disobey those orders.
Right.
And that's what King's message was.
Amen.
Right?
Brother Ward, do you see how we have problems in Illinois by having a district director that's also a preacher?
But I am feeling right at home with this. This is just really what we need.
Brother Ingram?
Yes. So I think for me, two things and two people come to mind for me immediately when we talk about this idea of silence. Both Audre Lorde, who told us that our silence will not save us. And then I think about what James Baldwin said, right, where to be a conscious Negro in America is to be in a rage almost all the time.
Right.
So this idea that we should ever be silent is a tool of white supremacy. And I would like to also tap into the idea and the reality that it's not just the white supremacists who are telling us to keep quiet. As you asked about the idea of the academy and where we are situated at, we have watched and witnessed the silencing and the attack on academia, the discrediting of institutions, the discrediting of degrees, specifically the degrees in the social sciences that teach us about race and racism and anti-Blackness and that whole space, right? And so if we discredit those degrees, if we remove the funding for those degrees, we can't have an educated class of people to help us to rise up right out of the ashes of where we are currently situated in. One of the things that I'm often approached with are people who are often asking me to be quiet, who are often saying that they are in disagreement with the things that I say. But the things that I'm talking about are rooted in the works and teachings of Dr. King and Derek Bell and Angela Davis and Audre Lorde and all of these great thinkers who gave us intentional marches and marching orders, right, and how we are to operate in times like this. And silence should be the furthest thing from what we're doing. When we're looking at the university right now, the university has the greatest opportunity to push back, but so many are capitulating, and it's not just in the red states. It's also in the blue states. It's also not just at public institutions. It's also at private institutions that have a little bit more freedom to be able to resist in this moment, right? We are watching people actually tell us, even my own self, my own experience, right? People are saying like, your work is great. We love what you do. We love what you speak for, and we stand in support of that. But unfortunately, we can't share that from the purview of the university because we don't want to be in the crosshairs of this man, right? So people are actively asking us as Black people, as Black scholars, as one of the only Black folks, Black faculty at my institution, one of the only Black faculty on the tenure track, they're asking me to put down my identity, to put down my racialized experiences, to be quiet so we don't hurt the feelings of a petulant man-child.
Right. And I was thinking both when Brother Ward and Brother McInnes were talking about how we present Dr. King today. And what reminds me of is something that my father used to say, is that we present the image of Dr. King to make white folks feel comfortable and a little less guilty.
Yep.
And, that's always stuck with me because when I look at the end of Dr. King's life, and how he began to transform and moving into those spaces where they told him not to speak about. I can't help but also see the correlations with Malcolm X, with how Malcolm X started adjusting his views towards the end of his life. And we can look at several other others who demanded justice, who demanded equality for our people, but were somehow silenced. And this transitions to my next point, a quote from another one of our brothers, Dr. Cornel West. And Cornel West once said that justice is what love looks like in public. Mm-hmm. And this quote has always stuck with me because, King not only used justice as a rallying cry, but also used love as a rallying cry. And we think of love and we think of justice both as moral imperatives. And so within that context, how much justice are we seeing right now? How much equity? And I'll just throw this out in general. We're not seeing a lot of love, but how do we get more justice for our communities, for the people that we serve, in line for what King called for during his time?
Brothers, you mind if I take this one first?
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things that we have to think about too, and I think of Dr. Imani Perry particularly when she talks about Black exceptionalism, right? There's this idea, right, of a particular kind of Black folks that are deserving of these things, who are deserving of peace, who are deserving of time in the sun, who are deserving of liberation. But it doesn't always include all Black people. It doesn't include those of us who are in the margins. It doesn't include those of us who are poverty stricken. It doesn't include those of us who are incarcerated. It doesn't include those of us who are disabled or queer. It doesn't include everybody in that. And part of our work, particularly as Black Greek-lettered organizations, part of our work is making sure that as we are fighting for and pushing for liberation, that we are considering all Black people who are under the guide of Blackness, who are being attacked, right? Who are being persecuted every single day in every single way. Not just Black people in America, but also Black people abroad. The Black people that don't look like us or speak the same language as us. Our work, our liberation push has to be for all Black people, not just some of us.
Absolutely.
I agree 100%. And I want to read you all something that Dr. King said in November of 1962, prior to the March on Washington. Dr. King said, and I have a copy of the speech here, "We must make it clear that we are concerned about shaking the very structure of this society to the point that a moral balance comes into being." Now, here's a man that's saying we have to shake the very structure of American society. And to go back to our previous conversation, we have to take on, as a retired president of a university, our institutions must stand strong now like never before. When local legislators and federal folk are trying to tell professors what their curriculum, what their syllabi needs to include, what courses need to be taught, that is propaganda at its fullest order.
Absolutely.
And we've got to understand that this regime that is now in Washington is truly working from Project 2025. They have laid out a strategy, and we know it, the story that we've always known. If I control your mind, as Carter G. Woodson said, I don't have to worry about you going to the back door, because so a man thinketh. So we've got to raise up more and more and put our own schools in place. Chapters throughout this country and abroad should be having African American history classes where we are putting in the hands of generations behind us and generations in front of us the true knowledge, so that they can fight with equipment that prepares them intellectually. And so that's why we cannot succumb to this passive behavior that we will not teach courses in African American history because it makes some other folk uncomfortable. It doesn't make them uncomfortable. It's a part of a larger strategy to keep us limited in our knowledge. The other point too is that King said some things that were very clear. He laid out a strategy. He said, number one, we must register to vote. We must register to vote and be engaged in politics 365 days of the year. And we also need to recruit persons that will have the courage, the fortitude, and the determination to fight against discrimination and injustice. We don't need anyone who can't stand now and be silent. If you're going to be silent, stay home. This is not a time for people who are not willing to stand. The second thing he said was, we've got to advocate for legislation That's why we got the 1964 Civil Rights Act. That's why we got the 1965 Voting Rights Act. See, those are the strategies and the components of King no one wants to talk about. So we've got to go after legislation. And finally, we've got to come together and work collectively. And I would suggest that we must have an underground strategy. You don't need to tell folk what we gonna do. Let them see the results of our work, and then you'll get the political modification that I think we want in this country.
Let me, and we're starting to run up on time, so I got two core questions I want to ask before we start wrapping up. And I'm going to throw this actually to you, Brother McInnes. And I almost hate to ask this question in this way, but I think it needs to. Is there a difference? Is there a different set of morality among Blacks, African Americans, and our Caucasian counterparts, or does the concept of morality differ between who we say our people and, let's just say, the other people? How would you respond to that?
Well, let me say this. I think King would draw back on his Christian roots, right? I mean, he would go to the source that fed him, and argue that there ought to be some kind of understanding of what morality and what ethics are in society. It doesn't always play or manifest in this way. I'll give you an example. If you read the works of someone like Clifton H. Johnson, who wrote a wonderful book called God Struck Me Dead, or the work of Albert Roberteau, Enslaved Religion, right? You get a clear glimpse that even enslaved Africans understood the contradictory message between a country and a slave master that told them not to steal, right? Not to steal food from the house, not to steal, things they needed to eat to feed their children, right? But we have these prayers from, newly freed enslaved persons who were telling about their conversion story to Christian faith. And one of the funniest prayers in God Struck Me Dead, Clifton Johnson's narrative, goes something like this: Dear Lord, Master tell me not to steal, but what not stolen? In other words, the enslaved folk were already thinking theologically. They were already thinking about ethics and morals in ways that, we find to be pretty interesting, because they saw that the promise of equality and thus so on forth was not really afforded to them, even though their enslavers imagined themselves to live in what they understood to be this Christian society. Now, let me say this, Brother Smoot. For all the reasons that Brother Ward and Brother Ingram just mentioned a moment ago, this is the very reason why we have a Black studies tradition, right? University campuses, students in the 60s, right, were inspired to understand that there existed, not at the peripheral of the American project, but at the center of the American experience, there existed a culture and an intellectual tradition that European philosophy coming out of the West did not really understand. So the Black studies tradition coming out of the American university was precisely because university students understood that in the context of freedom fighting, in the context of the civil rights movement, there is a story, as Bob Marley would say, half the story ain't never been told.
Right.
And that is the deep intellectual and cultural creativity that Black folk have given this country. One of our favorite sons, Du Bois, recognized this, right? Du Bois also recognized that even though there was this intellectual spirit, this creative spirit that Black folk had gifted the U.S., he also understood that Black bodies, the very presence of Black bodies, presented a problem for the American experiment in democracy, because these bodies were caught betwixt and between a nation that celebrated freedom in one sense, but by the way, did not celebrate freedom for all the people that were present inside, its walls. So I think this clarion call of Brother Ward to pay attention to the Black study tradition, to pay attention to the African American studies and the historical context out of which these conversations emerge is fiercely important. And if we do not heed those kind of calls, I think we miss something for ourselves and for future generations of learners.
Well, and I think when you talk about the future generations, that leads into my next question. And
I can't believe we have 8 minutes. What in the world?
I know, it's this is what happens when we get these types of panelists and people who actually are engaged in information. But I wanted to say, Brother Ward, you brought up Dr. King's admonition to get registered to vote and to vote. And I want to take that one just a little step further because many of us, we talk about the need for moral leadership. We talk about the need to have moral leadership, not only in our government, but in our community organizations, in corporations, and especially in organizations like Alpha Phi Alpha. For you, as someone who has been a leader, and everyone on this call is a leader in their own right, but for you, who was once the leader of one of the most seminal organizations in this country, what does moral leadership look like to you, and how do we promote the next generation of moral leaders?
Well, for me, I think it's you remove yourself from the leadership role. And what I mean by that is you have to put the cause and the people are greater than the individual sitting in the chair. So it was never about Everett Ward, Brother Ward, as the general president. It was about Brother Ward being empowered by the brotherhood to give guidance to the fraternity and the upward positive mobility of the fraternity.
Right.
And so following King is service before self. And what I believe is that in order to sit in chairs of leadership, regardless of where they are, the cause, the purpose, the mission supersedes the individuals. And for me, it was always about Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity as the preeminent fraternity of scholars and leaders and servants, and how we needed to make certain that wherever the table of leadership assembled, we had to be at the head table, or at least around the table, because we were not just speaking for the men of Alpha.
Right.
That when an Alpha enters the room, he must speak for our people and not for himself, but that his voice must always be there as that foundation for the upward mobility of our people. And I thought that was my moral responsibility and my moral mission as the general president. And I take it in my day-to-day life now, and I have for 67 years, is that you can say anything you want about Everett Ward, but one thing you can't say is when you start talking about my people and my community, you're going to have a fight on your hands. And what do we say? We're going to fight till hell freezes over.
And then we're going to fight on ice. Right. Brother McInnes, I want to throw you a similar question. What can we do to inspire and bring about the next generation of moral leaders?
Yeah, I think we have to, as an Alpha, we have to do our mission. Alpha Phi Alpha, develop leaders, right? I mean, I think if we lean into that and we're honest about that, I think that the future is secure. And I know that for me, and I'll pivot to Brother Ingram in a moment. I know that for me, coming through this fraternity, I learned how to do alpha from people who mentored me, right? I learned what it meant to walk as an alpha man and to lean heavily into who we are, because there were men around who were interested in investing in me as a young 19-year-old college student, right? And the world of difference, Brother Smoot, that made in my life, and it wasn't a magic wand, it wasn't a difficult reality. It took men, and I'll say some of their names, like Brother John Williams, right? Brother Willis Lonzer, who, when I was in college as a young man, seeing these men at conventions, and I guess that maybe the time has passed where there's no trouble involved, but learning how to order a bourbon, paying from these men, right? And how to speak at a meeting and let my voice be heard, learning what Robert Rules of Order is and how to control a meeting with Robert Rules of Order, right? I think the training that came from Alpha Phi Alpha, and if we do that, Brother Smoot, I'm convinced. I'm convinced because I was a college brother myself. I'm convinced that if Alpha Phi Alpha simply does what we're called to do, then we can, in fact, raise a generation of leaders who will be exceptional in every walk of human endeavor, whether it's the academy, whether it's sports, whether it's music, whether it's arts, because that's what we do. We develop leaders. And Brother Ingram, I'm gonna
yeah, for sure. So, I think listening to this question that Brother Smoot asked about morality, right? I think first, in order for us to be moral leaders, we have to be servant leaders, right? Your leadership cannot be centered in self-enrichment, right? I think about the fact that I've been an alpha as I'm sitting here, just 23 years, I'm only 42. I've been an alpha like more than half my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in terms of like,
same here, brother.
You know what I mean? So in terms of what that looks like and what that means, I think it literally means for us showing people, right, what servant leadership looks like without looking for something in return. I think when we talk about this country, right, and we talk about morality and moral leadership, it doesn't exist. The rules were never made for white people, right? And I don't call them Caucasian, I call them white people because that's what they legalize themselves as in this country, right?
Okay.
And so I think in terms of how we understand that, we have to look at the way that and who is required to be right moral, right? We have a president who was convicted of 34 felonies. Meanwhile, we got African Americans who lost the right to vote. We have Black women who are incarcerated because they put a different address to get their kids schooled better. We got a Black mom under arrest and being investigated because of the fact that she sold her food stamps in order to pay for food and made dessert or something else. The rules have never been right for us or righteous for us in America, which is a social experiment. I think more than anything right now, we are witnessing America operate like a social experiment. Every single day, we are witnessing the lack of morality. We are witnessing somebody deciding for themselves how the rules should operate. And I think when we think legally, right, we think about, court cases, Supreme Court cases, right? We think about Marbury v. Madison, we think about McCulloch v. Maryland, right? That were about overreach, that were about the ability for the courts to be able to sit in their original jurisdiction, right? None of that is happening right now. All of the rules are scrambled. We are the only people still operating from a place of morality, and the rule book has to change.
And I think I'm still digesting a couple of things what you said. I wish we had another hour, but I do, my brothers. I do want to thank you. We are running. We have come up on the end of our time. We're going to continue to have conversations like these, both on this subject and others. So I want to say first publicly, I hope that all of you will agree to return with us again, because this is something that we here in the District of Illinois are proud of, to have these conversations and engage with brothers like yourself, Brother President Ward, and Brother Dr. Ingram, and even you, Brother Dr. McInnes. But the reality is that these conversations are important, and especially on a day like today where we are recognizing the life and legacy of our brother. And just for the record, for any naysayers, Dr. King was a duly initiated member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. But with that, before as I end it, I want to give everyone.
I'm sorry, real quick, before we hop off, I do want to. I have a question for Brother Ward, because I know that this is it's midterms, and I know we're out of time. But Brother Ward, could you say something about the Alpha Pack and how brothers
see this is what happens when you don't let me finish speaking?
Can get involved. But go ahead. So I know where you're going, but I just want to make sure that
no, go ahead. Yeah, Brother Ward, if you could speak about the Alpha Pack and its impact and how it operates, and why the Alpha Pack is important.
Well, first of all, we began the Alpha Pack, and as Brother McKenzie did, let me put the clear disclaimer. The Alpha Pack has no affiliation at all with Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity. We are a separate political action committee that raises money to support candidates who mirror and follow the path of our political policies that are of concern. We also have, as a part of the Alpha Pack, the Adam Clayton Powell Political Institute, where we are training a new generation of young men and women in a 2-track academic area. One, if you're interested in becoming an elected official, and the second track, if you're interested in an executive level position to run political campaigns. The Political Action Committee raises its own money through the generosity of persons who are committed to the cause. I'll give you a good example. Just last week, we endorsed the congressional candidacy of Dr. Freddie Haynes in Texas. We also endorsed and financially supported Congressman Cleaver. We recognize that we have to raise money and support individuals that we know have the courage and the determination to stand up for issues. And you are welcome to go to alphapack.net to learn more about it. But you will remember that we began the organization. The charter members put their own resources in place, because at that time, you remember there was an all-out assault on defeating who is now United States Senator Raphael Warnock. You all remember that? And we needed to have in place where we could support him. And so this election cycle is very important. The midterm is very important, because that will determine the control of the U.S. House of Representatives. Also, we have on the ballot this year Governor Wes Moore, who is running for re-election. So there are a number in Maryland. So there are a number of key elections that we are very involved in, and but we are being very clear that you're not going to come after the tax exempt status of Alpha Phi Alpha. We are smart enough to understand that when strong Black men raise money and have a political agenda, folk will come after you. But we are strong who we are.
Well, Brother Ward, I hope you guys are also looking in Illinois in the 2nd Congressional District. We can talk about that after that. But as I literally was just about to ask you about the Alpha Pack, having looked at it closely, particularly over the last few months. But I want to, as we wrap up, I want to give everyone 2 minutes just to make a final statement. Brother Ward, I want to start with you regarding this topic of the moral situation that we're in, and your thoughts, brief thoughts on that.
Well, what I'd like to do is use the words of Brother King for my closing. The night before he was killed, this is the words that have stayed with me. Let us rise up tonight with a greater readiness. Let us stand with a greater determination. And let us move on in these powerful days, these days of challenge, to make America a better nation. And to me, that is what we are about as we honor the legacy of Dr. King.
Absolutely. Dr. Ingram, just a brief closing statement.
For sure. One of the videos that I posted today in honor of this day was a quote or video of Dr. King specifically talking about, I read somewhere I read, right, in terms of like our right to resist, our right to protest, and more particularly the reason why we did that is so we could have rights. And I think about that, and I think about that as a moral obligation, a moral duty as a people to resist, right, to disrupt what's taking place, and at the very least, not to go quietly into the night.
Right. And Brother McKinnis.
Yeah, I both of them went to April 3rd, and I will go April 3rd as well. King was in the church, Dr. Ingram, when he gave those closing comments right before he took his seat. And he talked about how he could understand injunctions and court orders if he were in Russia or China. But he said, somewhere I read that what makes America great is the right to protest for rights. Yes. And those were the words that were cemented before he was assassinated the next day on April 4th, 1968. And I just think about this moment, Brother Smoot, to get to your question. There is a real moral crisis in this nation. And I think it takes people of courage, of goodwill, and people who understand the significance of not paying attention to history to really understand what is unfolding. And I'll say it again, the views of Leonard McKinnis as a university professor, not as district director of Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated. These are my views. What is happening across our country with the arrest of American citizens who are being targeted because of an accent by a manufactured police program of people with little to no training who are abusing their rights to arrest, who are recklessly killing American people. That's a moral crisis.
Absolutely.
And as men of Alpha, I think for us to not recognize that as individuals, the general president speaks for the fraternity, but as individuals, to do that self-examination, line 38A of the Apology by Socrates, where he says the unexamined life is not worth living, right? If we do that self-examination and square that with what we see unfolding in this nation, if we cannot come to a common conclusion that we are living in a moral crisis, then we are in deep trouble. Absolutely. We are in deep trouble. And Brother Ingram hit it on the head earlier, talking about how Blackness is perceived. Blackness is a diasporic community. There are Black folk in this country and across the diaspora. And immigrants, as you all know, are not just folks from Southern America. Right. Immigrants also includes folks from the continent of Africa.
Exactly.
Nigerians and Ghanaians and Ethiopians, right? It includes Somalians. And so if we are not brave enough to take seriously that line in Letter from a Birmingham Jail, I am here in Birmingham because we are tied in a mutual garment of destiny.
That's right.
That what impacts folks in Birmingham impacted me in Georgia.
That's right.
And so like Paul, Brother Ward, he says, like Paul, I left my hamlet and I came here. So I'll leave it there, Brother Smoot, because I know you're going to have some jokes tomorrow about bringing Paul into this. But
you know I'm going to have jokes. You know I'm going to have jokes. Brothers, I do want to thank you. It has definitely been our profound pleasure, especially I want to give a special shout out to Brother Dr. Ingram. Our brother, State Senator L.G. Sims, was unfortunately unable to join us. And Brother Ingram was gracious enough to join us at the last minute and join in this conversation. And your input was so valuable. So thank you, my brother, for filling in, and thank you for contributing. I'm extremely appreciative of you. Brother Dr. Ward, as always, it is a pleasure to have you here, to fellowship with you, and to have conversation with you. And as someone who did lead one of our organizations dealing with these particular issues, it was particularly salient to have you here with us tonight. And always to our esteemed district director, I don't say very many nice things to his face. I only say nice things about him publicly. But no, seriously, Brother McInnes, thank you for supporting this effort on behalf of the District of Illinois. This is something that not only the district takes pride in, but the region and the fraternity, because we need to be having more of these conversations. And coming up in the next few months before Dr. McInnes leaves office, we're going to be having a lot more of these, not just looking at personal profiles, but having substantial discussions about things that affect us as Alpha Men and affect our larger community. So please, everyone, remember, please hit like and subscribe. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram. You can also follow us on YouTube, where if you come in on the end of this, you can catch the full episode on YouTube. Everything is permanently housed at the District of Illinois Alpha Phi Alpha, our YouTube channel, and you can see a lot of our fireside chats that we have done over the last 2 years. So please look at those and check those out. And on behalf of the brothers of the District of Illinois of Alpha Phi Alpha, I would say on behalf of Brother Dr. McInnes, but he's here. But we do want to thank you all for joining in. Brother Ingram, Brother Ward, Brother McInnes, thank you again. This has been a great discussion, and we look forward to having you all back at some time.
Thank you.
Thank you.